The blue forest moved in silence except for the sound of feet that made almost none. Dozens of black-robed figures crossed the treeline at speed, spreading through the undergrowth with the practiced efficiency of people who did this kind of thing regularly and had long since stopped finding it remarkable. Gerard ran at the front, his expression the particular blankness that meant he was paying attention to everything. They reached their destination and stopped. Helmets were produced and fitted, full-faced, sealed, with a transparent membrane across the eyes. Gerard checked the seal on his own and looked ahead. The field before them was wrong in the way that things touched by monster energy were wrong, too vivid, too still, the flowers standing nearly as tall as a person and arranged in no pattern that nature would have chosen. As the shadows approached the perimeter, the blooms began to exhale. Pale mist drifted from their petals in slow, deliberate clouds. Hallucinogenic. Strong enough to make a man forget his own name within minutes. Everyone checked their helmets. The shadows fanned out in a wide circle, moving to encircle the grove, each one holding a gem that caught the light in a way that ordinary stones didn't. Jerome's work, designed to prevent regrowth for the next 500 years. He had been motivated, apparently, by competitive feeling toward an ancestor who had only managed 100. Gerard moved inward. The flowers reached for him as he passed, petals extending, tracking, the way predatory things tracked, but they could not keep up with his pace. He went through them like wind through tall grass and emerged into the center of the grove. There. It was not what he had expected. The creature guarding by the monster flowers, the source, the leader, the thing that controlled the rest, was approximately knee-height. Its petals were iridescent, shifting through colors with each small movement, and they were shaped, he thought with some surprise, rather like the wings of a butterfly. The stem was deeply, healthily green. It was, objectively, rather pretty. When he stepped toward it, the flower flinched. Its bud pulled inward, petals tucking tight, the whole plant drawing into itself as though it had decided that if it made itself small enough, the problem would go away. Gerard stopped. Looked at it. The flower trembled. He checked his helmet seal one final time, held his breath, and touched the flat of his sword very lightly to the outermost edge of a petal. The monster flower exploded into violent motion, flailing, shaking, pollen scattering in every direction, and then, all at once, went completely still. Its bud dropped. Its petals hung limp. Gerard stared at it. It was pretending to be dead. He stood with this information for a moment. Then, despite himself, he laughed, a short, quiet sound, and reached for the shovel. He scooped the plant from the earth in one motion, pot of soil and all. The bud shot upright the instant it was airborne, petals flaring with apparent indignation, and Gerard dropped it directly into the sealed bag Jerome had prepared. The bag closed. The flower thrashed against the interior for several seconds, then, he could feel it through the fabric, went still again with the affronted dignity of something that had run out of options. Behind him, the perimeter shadows moved in. Gems hit the earth. Auras rose along sword edges. The grove would not regrow. Julia had been to Adri's workshop and back before the morning was properly underway, and the maids she passed in the corridor greeted her with the particular warmth reserved for people who have been around long enough to become part of a place. Back already? Yes. It wasn't a long errand today. A newer maid watched her pass and leaned toward the one beside her. Why does everyone treat that one so well? That's Julia. The newer maid understood at once. During the orientation for new staff, Julia's name had come up, the Duchess's closest attendant, the one who had been there from before the West, who had grown from a girl who couldn't finish a sentence into someone the household simply trusted. Julia knocked on the bedroom door and entered. Marine was in the chair by the window with a book open in her lap and her eyes closed, which was not technically sleeping if one was generous about definitions. She opened them when Julia came in, and yawned so thoroughly that her whole body participated. You came back early, Marine observed. You've seemed tired lately, Julia said. I thought I'd come check on you. I'm perfectly fine. Another yawn. I'm just always sleepy. It's the weather. Julia looked at her with the expression of someone who has more to say and is deciding how to say it. Maureen had been this way for several weeks now, no other symptoms, nothing obviously wrong, just this persistent drowsiness that folded over her at odd hours and occasionally one. She had fallen asleep twice last week while sitting upright at her desk. Have you considered seeing the physician? I'm not ill. Ma'am, it's warm and sunny and I am comfortable, Maureen said with great dignity. Some people simply respond to pleasant weather by becoming sleepy. It's a known phenomenon. Julia said nothing. She had been with Maureen long enough to recognize the expression of someone who has already thought of something and is managing how to think about it. Maureen had, in fact, thought of something. Her cycle had not come last month. It was entirely possible it was nothing, stress, disruption, any number of things, but there was one other possibility she kept returning to, and she was choosing to be careful with it. She didn't want to say it aloud yet. Not until she was sure. And if she was sure, she wanted Gerard to be the first to know. One more month, she thought. If nothing changes, I'll see the physician. I cannot take it anymore, Maureen announced, setting her book aside. I'm going back to sleep. Julia watched her settle into the covers with the efficient speed of someone who had already mostly been asleep and looked at the door with a faint, worried expression. Jerome examined the monster flower with narrowed eyes. It sat in its sealed container on his workbench and regarded him with the tightly closed bud of something that had decided not to cooperate. When he moved the specimen needle toward it, it shrank back. Is it afraid? Jerome said. Apparently. Gerard stood to the side, arms crossed. Jerome made a thoughtful sound and extracted a small sample from the stem. The fluid was blue, which was strange and also exactly the sort of thing Jerome found interesting. He had been studying Bunny for months without finding the root cause of her changes, and this, a monster flower that showed fear, that had its own hierarchy, that protected its leader, might carry something useful. If it were mature enough to produce poison, I'd have more to work with, Jerome said. Can you work with what you have? I'll manage. He said it with the confidence of someone who always managed. Come back in a few days. Gerard thanked him, meaning it, and Jerome backed away from the gratitude with the expression he always wore when sincerity made him uncomfortable, which was most of the time. Gerard showered quickly and came to the bedroom. Maureen was already asleep, had been, from the look of it, since well before dark, curled on her side with the unfussy ease of someone whose body had simply made a unilateral decision. He crossed the room quietly, settled into bed beside her, and gathered her in. She made a small sound. You're back. Sleep. What time is it? Late. How late? Night. A pause. He felt her properly wake, the slight stiffening, the sequence of calculations happening behind her eyes. How many hours have I been asleep? Several. Several, Maureen repeated, in a tone that suggested she was going to have opinions about this once she was more conscious. You needed it. She looked up at him, eyes still soft with sleep, and he looked back at her with the expression that always appeared when she was close, that helpless, total expression he was entirely unaware of making. I'm not tired anymore, she said. I can fix that. She narrowed her eyes. That sounds ominous. It isn't. His hand moved slowly along her back, unhurried, the way he touched her when he was mostly just glad she was there. You're enjoying it. Her face went immediately pink. Could you please not say things like that so easily? Why? Because I feel embarrassed. I find the way you blush. I'm hungry, Maureen said. Gerard went still. The reliable intervention. He knew perfectly well what she was doing. He also knew, with equal certainty, that he was not able to argue with it in good conscience, because feeding her had been his primary hobby since approximately the third week of their acquaintance, and some instincts ran too deep to override with logic. He pressed his forehead to hers and sighed. The sound was long-suffering and mostly theatrical. "I'm hungry too," he said, after a moment. "But not for food." Marine clapped her hand over his mouth. "We can eat dinner," she said, very clearly, "and then we can discuss your other situation." He looked at her over her own hand. "We didn't this morning," he said, muffled but comprehensible. Marine lowered her hand and stared at him. "Does it need to happen in the morning as well?" The question was genuine. He watched her actually consider it. Her face said all of this. Gerard read her face fluently and decided not to comment on what it said. Once, Marine said finally, in a tone of negotiating from a position of compromised resistance. He smiled. It was the slow, satisfied kind. "Certainly."